I'm Maggie Brickerman, and I am a partner at Generator. We are a venture fund and network of startup accelerators headquartered in Wisconsin, next door. And we are honored to be the host of the OnRamp Education and Workforce Innovation Conference. We have a great 2 days in store for you. We're so glad that you are all here. Many people came from right down the street and from far and wide, and we're just so pleased to see all of you here. So first, I want to give a huge thank you to ECMC Group and ECMC Foundation, our presenting sponsors for this event. Let's give them a huge round of applause. They are headquartered right here in the Twin Cities, and we have had the honor of working with them over the past 3 years on both our OnRamp Education and Workforce Innovation Accelerator and this conference. And it is just a wonderful partnership. I think we really share a vision for the future of education and workforce, and they're just a super high energy and amazing team, and it's a thrill to work with them. So I am excited to introduce Dan Fisher, who is the president and CEO of ECMC Group, to give some opening remarks. Dan, as I said, is the president and CEO of ECMC Group, where he leads a team committed to creating, providing, and financially supporting advancements in post-secondary education, particularly for the historically underserved. And I can tell you from the standpoint of the accelerator, they are really living that mission in terms of investing in startups through that program and their other venture funds. So before this current role, Dan was president of ECMC, where he was responsible for managing and coordinating all federal family education loan program and guarantee agency programs for ECMC. And he also served as the general counsel and corporate secretary of ECMC Group, where he was the primary legal advisor to the corporation and affiliates, including its executive management team and board of directors. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dan. Please give him a warm welcome.
Thanks, Maggie. I'll take maybe a moment and dissuade anybody from their belief that I'm high energy. I think what she said was the team is high energy, so just temper your expectations up front. And I know that nobody came to this conference to hear me talk, so my comments will be brief. I'm very excited. As Maggie said, I'm Dan Fisher. I'm the president and CEO of ECMC Group, and I'm really excited about the work that we get to do each day to help students recognize and realize their full potential. And we do that at ECMC by investing in, creating, and providing innovative education solutions that support schools and improve student educational outcomes, and in doing so, support the communities that they live and work in. Simply stated, our mission is to help students succeed. And I'm excited here today to kick off what I'm sure is going to be an amazing 2 days filled with insightful discussions, innovative pitches, valuable connections, and collaborations. We've all talked at length about the destructive and disruptive impact of the pandemic on education. I've seen this up close. My oldest son graduated from high school in 2020 and matriculated into a college bubble. And that phrase generally is not talked about all that much. I also had one in high school and one in middle school, and my wife is a 4th grade teacher. So I see the need for innovative thinking for not only re-engaging students and teachers impacted by the long-term effects of the pandemic, but also to impact the effects that we don't yet know about and are still uncovering. And we need to build stronger connections between employers and educators through workforce development solutions. And a prime example of that disruption is evident in national data that ECMC has collected over the last 4 years from high school students that show a 20 percentage point decline in interest in obtaining a 4-year degree. Let's just think about that. 20 percentage point decline for high schoolers in interest in obtaining a 4-year degree. And very few of these students feel prepared to make a decision about their future after graduation. This alone illustrates that we need to do more to help inform our next generation of workers about their post-secondary education options. The good news from this research is that high school students understand that post-secondary education, some form of post-secondary training, will be key to their future success. And all of us in this room have to take the time to not only understand the changing needs of learners, but build, support, and invest in innovation to meet those needs. Several years ago, ECMC Group chose to create a venture fund to finance, catalyze, and address these issues that are core to our mission. Under the leadership of Joe Watt, ECMC Group's Education Impact Fund is a sizable impact investment platform investing across the growth life cycle of companies. The Education Impact Fund invests in companies that are aligned with our mission and focusing on post-secondary education and employment with the goal of building an inclusive, highly impactful, and economically sustainable education system. In addition, ECMC Foundation, which is our national foundation focused on improving higher education for underserved population through evidence-based innovation. The foundation supplements its grant-making strategy through its program-related investment activity. These PRIs provide flexible capital to early-stage ventures working to increase post-secondary educational outcomes, as well as economic mobility for learners and job seekers from underserved backgrounds. And by focusing our PRIs on specific themes like student success tools and employment connectivity and outcomes, while supporting historically underrepresented students, we're fueling lasting impact and promoting evidence-based innovative approaches. 3 years ago, as Maggie said, we launched our partnership with Generator to create the OnRamp Workforce and Education Innovation Conference and Accelerator to support the companies developing the next generation solutions in these sectors. And through partnerships like this, we are able to invest capital to execute on our mission while supporting founders and solutions that are tackling some of education's most difficult problems. Finally, and most importantly, we applaud all of the individuals in this room who are working to improve the lives of our learners, our workers, and our communities, and we look forward to continuing our work together to ensure that learners at all stages of their education journey are able to reach their career goals now and into their future. So thank you for your time over the next couple days. I'm very excited to be partnering with Maggie and the team from Generator, and I'm looking forward to a productive few days here. Thank you. Back to Maggie.
Turn it on, step one. Thank you so much, Dan. We are very grateful for your partnership. So our next panel, we just have one panel this afternoon before we head to the Startup Showcase, is around the Microsoft LinkedIn initiative in reskilling the modern workforce. And Generator has been privileged to be a part of this since the pandemic in 2020. And I'll let them tell you all about the work that they're doing across the country, Microsoft and LinkedIn, and then a little bit with Generator, which we're very privileged to do. I think the thing that I want to say before I introduce them is we are a company that started, and so most of our work is investing in startup companies like many of you in the room. And in 2020, we co-created the Generator Skills Accelerator in an effort to help really fill the gap and help people upskill into digital careers. And at our company, we have a wins channel where when someone raises money or someone gets a big customer, you name it, we're sharing and celebrating that as a company. And I will tell you that our involvement in the skills program has just allowed us to build relationships with so many individuals who were unemployed and are now, thanks to this partnership, in a job that can support their family and take the best advantage of their talents. And I can tell you that we celebrate those people on a daily basis with as much joy and enthusiasm as we do when someone raises a giant venture round. So it's just been an incredible way to live out our mission, and I'm excited for you to learn more about it. So with us, we have Dennis Ellis, who's the Community Engagement Manager at Microsoft. We also have the privilege of working with Dennis on some startup programming. We have Matt Anderson, who's the Account Director of State and Local Government Talent Solutions at LinkedIn. And we have Cole Shearer, who is Partner and VP of the Generator Skills Accelerator. And we didn't tell them that they had to carry their own chairs, but here we are. So come on up, guys. Let's give them a warm welcome. That's how we do it at Generator. Here you go.
BYOC, bring your own chair. All right, welcome everyone. We are so excited to welcome Microsoft and LinkedIn, talking about what both of the organizations are doing to close the skills gap, and then the work that we get the privilege to do alongside you for our Skills Accelerator. But first of all, this is a room full of people that are passionate about education and workforce development, and I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. And it's amazing to have these conversations on a daily basis and here in this room about workforce development and education. So thank you for coming. But first of all, I wanted to do a quick round of introductions here with the panelists. As Maggie mentioned, I'm Cole. I'm the VP of our Skills Accelerator and a partner here at Generator. And then I'll leave it to Dennis to do a quick intro, and then we'll dig into TechSpark, and then Matt also to do a quick intro.
You bet. Thank you, Cole. As many of you have probably done in remote work the last few years, I've been working with Cole for 3 years, but I gave him a hug this morning because it's the first time I've ever physically touched him, so he's a real person. He's not an AI bot. And in my mind, he was 6'6", which I can only think that I just respect him, so I gave him a ton of height in my imagination. So weird. But yeah, so I'm Dennis Ellis. I live in Cheyenne, Wyoming. It's about 100 miles north of Denver. I'm sure many of you have flown over it or driven through it on I-80. Great town, sort of Western setting. Our biggest economic driver is a rodeo, of course. So pretty fun to bring Microsoft technology view into that community and try and help it, which we'll get into in a bit.
Thanks, Cole. My name is Matt Anderson. I work at LinkedIn as an account director on our state and local government team. So I partner with government agencies on really anything they're doing that touches talent, from acquisition and talent strategy, learning and development, employee retention, and of course, workforce development as well. So that's how I come to this conversation, have been working with Cole over the last year or so, and looking forward to the conversation today.
Awesome, and the reason that we have these organizations here is we have our Generator Skills program in partnership with Microsoft and LinkedIn. And Generator Skills is a skills training program where we help under and unemployed individuals gain the skills that they need for today's workforce. And then alongside the program, Microsoft and LinkedIn are doing some incredible work around closing the skills gap. But first, I wanted to throw it to you, Dennis, to talk a little bit about Microsoft and TechSpark. We have some fellow TechSpark members in the crowd here, so welcome. But talk us through a little bit about what TechSpark does and how you're approaching the skills gap.
Yeah, thanks, Cole. So TechSpark's probably the most interesting job I've had in my career. You can see the gray, so I've had a few jobs. It's not premature. So yeah, TechSpark 2016, Brad Smith, who's the president of Microsoft, he's like our number 2 guy, and a lot of times our face guy that if there's a hour of coding at the Vatican, with the Pope or something, he's like the guy on the scene. And then lately working on all the regulatory stuff all over the world. It's pretty fascinating. He had seen, he's a Wisconsin boy from a rural area, and he'd seen how, so much of the wealth and innovation and talent is magneted to all the urban centers, right? Like not a new story, so Austin or Boston or San Francisco or Seattle. And so, because when you go to Seattle, you think it's all these Seattle people, but they're not. They're from Kansas, and they're from Wyoming, and they're from little nowhere Colorado, and that's where they had to go to find other people like themselves to innovate, smart people like smart people. And so he thought, what can we do as Microsoft to try and bring technology solutions into rural areas, skilling, job growth, economic development. And back then, the mantra before everybody, now it's just mainstream, which I love, was, broadband, like bringing broadband. It's like if you don't have access to the internet, you can't participate in the jobs, you can't get the skilling, you can't get all the education that you need. And it's been fun to watch over the last 6 years that's become so mainstream, that federal and state policymakers are just literally showering money on every community in the country. as long as we don't blow it and everybody spends it in the proper way, you know, we've advanced maybe 10 years in terms of broadband access. Other areas would be like computer science in the schools. We do a lot on job growth. You know, in my community, we run an accelerator, skills accelerator, but also a founders group, the G Beta, if any of you are alumni are in it, was sort of the original generator program to teach founders skills of how to raise money, pitch your company, who to ask for money, that kind of thing, and how it all works. And so that's kind of the story of TechSpark. We're deployed, that my colleagues here, you know, Lisa Karstetter is in Eastern Washington, so think apple orchards in the Gorge, that's kind of her area. Jeremy Satterfeld is from Southern Virginia and has a great program there, former tobacco area that's fallen on worse times. I'm in Wyoming, right? So coal and oil and natural gas, like no bueno anymore to people, and that's like what we do. And so we've had to find a new identity, and technology is part of that. And then Taya Spellhog, just across the way in Fargo, in an agricultural area. And so it's really fun, and we probably have been up to 11 sites, I think, and then this next year, we're actually, after 5 years of figuring out what we're doing, are now going national, and so we're gonna run a fellows program that we all get a sort of mentor, which we're a little nervous of, but we're expanding and scaling in our way to all 50 states this coming year.
Awesome. So you're talking about the growth of TechSpark. Talk us through the Global Skills Initiative at Microsoft and what that looked like from the start and then where it is today.
Yeah, so you know, early on when I started at Microsoft, say 2018, as a laid-off energy worker, by the way, who had to try to pretend now to be a technologist when I'm an English major recovering lawyer. So I know how that feels for all the people we're helping. And when you get to the other side, it's beautiful. So what we always talk about, though, is like, oh man, it's coming. You know, this is like in 2018, AI is coming. It's going to change a lot of things about the economy. I have a speech I pulled back out from 5 years ago that's really relevant now on the day the horse lost its job, to sort of talk about how we transitioned from a horse economy to a fossil fuel economy and how that eliminated some jobs but created 8 times more. And so try to give people perspective as you go into this sort of fourth industrial revolution. So anyway, we'd talk about that, and that was great. But then COVID came and was like, yeah, that's not going to happen by like 2025 or 2030. That's going to happen now, you know? And so the entire company, which I have to give Microsoft credit for the size of the ship they can turn it, just pivoted instantly into this global skilling initiative to try and help people displaced from COVID. And that also, all these systems play really well for AI displacement as well. But so we'd always talked about AI, and then it was just like COVID, and like everyone, you know, I'd been planning with Generator on doing a remote accelerator, which they hadn't done yet. And to me, that was like, in rural America, we don't have to do bricks and mortar, save a ton of money. That means any small town could pick this up. Except my kindergartner was on remote before our accelerator that we'd been planning for a year, right? Just by necessity. So anyway, so that's changed a lot, and that really was the focus, though, was COVID, and then now leading into AI. And so we've set out, and Matt would know better numbers, but the ones that stick in my mind are like 25 million people to upskill them through the LinkedIn Learning platform and easily hit that goal fairly quickly. I'd say the hardest part of that, though, is, of course, the metrics. And so, you know, you can certainly have people apply, and that's good to catch, and people accept, it's good to know, and people who finish and get the certificate's good to know. But the one metric that matters is, did they get the job that you trained them for? And that's kind of the only metric that matters. And we found through the Skills Accelerator, I think in the TechSpark regions, I think we're running this in maybe 10 locations or something. We've found that, you know, over 70% of the people who've applied, which we've probably put about 1,000 people through the program, 70% of which have gotten the job in the new field they were trained on. And this is like a month of training. And so to do that and move someone from, you know, $12 an hour in fast food to like $20 where they can be at home, even just to be a customer service rep and be with their kids, it's life-changing, you know, but it also gets them on the path of, hey, I just taught myself this job, like, what's next? It's like, oh, now I can be a project manager, which happens, by the way, to be the most in-demand job in the world the next 5 years. You know, and so if you hustle and do the skilling, you can become a project manager, and then you move into like salaried, you know, benefited jobs. So it's just powerful to see. It's hard to move people across the board, but each one you do, it's like, it's super powerful.
And so what you're touching on is a lot of the metrics, and we've been able to support over 2,000 job seekers through our skills program, even more just through the LinkedIn Learning platform. And it's tough, or it's easy to get lost in those numbers. 2,000, what's, another 100 people, right? But each of those people, as we can all imagine, is a story of someone that's getting that role and supporting themselves and their family from the training, the support that they're receiving. Any stories, maybe specifically your Wyoming market, that stick out to you for a participant story or anything like that that comes to mind?
Yeah, one of the most interesting one, I suppose, I have a lot of founder ones, but founders, I think, are people who are going to go, they could go be anything, right? They just choose to go be a founder. But the one I'd like to probably highlight is a woman, Nina, works at a deli, at the grocery store and cutting meat and that kind of thing. But young kids at home, other pressing family needs of elder care, and then being the sole breadwinner, right? So just really difficult situation that very common, right? Like tons of people are in this situation. And so she applied, and I think she just saw us on Facebook or something, but saw an ad, so she applied. And, with any job search, it's all about your effort and your intention, right? And how hard you try. She's like, I got to lift my station. And, when you're taking care of your kids, they're like, failure's not an option, right? So it just brings a different level of intention to it. And so she'd started doing the skills course and almost quit because she couldn't quite get the time in and whatnot. And so she quit that job and took a DoorDash job, which was like even a lower, jump in pay, but to try to give herself more flexibility for kids and parents and the training. And so did that mid-course, changed her job just to finish the course, and did so. And then, came clean at graduation with her mentor and advisor of just like in tears, like, I need to find somewhere I can work from home. Like this, otherwise I'm just like getting ripped in half. And so the mentor was able to be like, well, there's a job, fair today that's going on. You should check this out and speak with these employers. And then she calls back crying a couple hours later and has obtained a at-home job where she went from, $15 at the grocery store to over $20 an hour, now is at home and doesn't have to pay child care or elder care. And I'm sure things are still very difficult. But just seeing her change the trajectory of her life in 1 month, it's something to, like in Wyoming, I think of when the coal mines started to close pretty heavily. I love the University of Wyoming. Like I've got a couple degrees there. They're great. They showed up with a fair of like, hey, move to the other part of the state for 4 years and, learn something. And these miners are just like, got a boat payment, got a house payment, kid in college, whatever. It's like, that's not an option for people to just take out 4 years of their life, and so not to knock higher ed, but we need to be quicker at how we deliver skills to people because the economy is moving so quickly, and that would be one thing I would highlight. We've had a lot of accomplishment, but I would say hands down, the hardest thing to keep track of is the innovation in the economy, because as AI kicks off, now we're all scrambling. Like we had it all figured out like 6 months ago, and then the release of all the AI. And so now we're all scrambling of like, okay, like what are the skills needed? How do we teach people these things so that it's a meaningful credential that gets them a job, right? Or they work in this field or have some nexus to it. And so that's been the hardest part, is just the quickness. But I would say to our benefit is we've built all this infrastructure. So even in rural towns, like Lisa's in, Eastern Washington or Jeremy in Southern Virginia or me in Wyoming, we've got all the infrastructure built and the name ID and the brand in the community as like a trusted skilling partner. And then as we deploy new curriculum, like for AI, we're already like 80% of the way there. It's just like, what do we need to teach now? And so there's been a lot of shoulders to stand on that are great, but it's just keeping track of what's going on in the economy. And for LinkedIn to try and build all these modules and stay on top of it, it's a heavy, heavy effort. Because the worst thing you can do is waste someone's money and time, mainly their time, to train for something that doesn't result in a job. English major, I've got a degree and was like, well, that didn't work and had to go back. So anyway, I do love poetry, but.
That is fair. When you're talking about Nina, what I think about again is there's 2,000 Ninas that we've worked with, and putting that in perspective is so helpful, so thank you. Matt, I haven't forgotten about you. My team will attest here, that's here. I love LinkedIn. It's my favorite thing. I spend all day on LinkedIn, the actual platform for LinkedIn in general, but also LinkedIn Talent Insights, Recruiter, et cetera. Talk to us about a little bit about your role at LinkedIn, what you're doing to close the skills gap, and some of the products that you're serving, or selling, sorry.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Cole. I love LinkedIn too. Been there about 5 years. It's funny, because Dennis and I don't know each other super well, but I was a film major and also recovering lawyer. So
We should get with
Here
the
we
chat
are.
bot and write something.
anyway, so how LinkedIn works with our products when it comes to anything talent related, learning related, everything's built on our vast amounts of member data. So we've got about 930 million members, and we've got 40,000 skills mapped to those profiles. We've got 61 million job seekers coming on every week, so we know what they're looking for, and we know what skills are required for those jobs. We've got all the companies and what jobs they're posting, and we know what those jobs are and when they're being posted and where they are. And so we use all that data to power tools to help job seekers find the right job, help job seekers know what skills they need to pick up on to get the job, to develop the content in LinkedIn Learning to meet the needs of what's out there based on what people are looking for. And so all that data powers something like Talent Insights, a tool that Cole mentioned, and Recruiter. Those are two of our tools that workforce development agencies actually leverage to help job seekers find employers. It also helps agencies find employers that maybe don't know what kind of services the workforce development agency is offering to employers. Or if they're running a program that is upskilling somebody into a certain field, how do you make sure that all those local employers around you know that you've got candidates for them, and how do you identify those employers that should be aware of all that? So an example that comes to mind would be WorkSource Oregon. They're using both of those tools, both from a business services standpoint. So they identify employers that are out there that they're not working with yet. They know what jobs that employer is posting. They know what skills those employees at that employer are developing. What are the fastest growing skills at the employer? Who's the employer losing talent to? All that's information that they get from us. So they can go out to that employer with a use case for them and say, hey, we're actually developing citizens right now and educating them and could help place them into those roles that you need help with. And then on the flip side, they use us to find those job seekers. They know who's open to hearing about new opportunities out there in the job market. They know what those candidates' skills are. Obviously, you can see that whole skill history and work history of somebody and help place them into those roles, or identify somebody that's ripe for upskilling into that next step in their career.
And we have a lot of workforce folks in the crowd here. I'm curious from your perspective, every community is different. Every state's different. Every county is different. All different needs. How do you stay on top of that? And what comes to mind is we have our TechSpark team here from Southern Virginia. We have Wyoming, and from just those two communities, it's very different. How do organizations stay on top of that with the skills gap and how quickly it's changing?
Yeah, I mean, what you can do is like how workforce agencies, workforce boards really can leverage us is by getting really deep into the details of what's going on in their local economy. So, for instance, you're looking for, you've identified a skills gap, let's say, in an industry that's local to you. And there are no candidates there that have that skill, or there are very few. So where else in the state do those candidates live? And which pockets of your state are experiencing less relative demand from recruiters? Because we've got all that data too, like who's getting hit by recruiters all the time versus not. So let's focus on the pockets where people are lower relatively in demand than the others, and that's where we can focus on bringing those people into programs or placing those people. So we do have those ways to get really, really specific with which industries are local to you, and by company, and see those local businesses and what they're in need of, where they're losing people to, and which geographies people are moving to.
And one skills gap that we've identified is AI. and there's a after party tonight, I believe. Anytime AI is mentioned today, take a shot later tonight, maybe. I think we're up to maybe 5 or 6 from Dennis already, so be safe, please. But with AI, we've identified a skills gap, and one thing we were looking at earlier this week was using talent insights through LinkedIn. We identified in Wyoming, there's about 129 people in the entire state of Wyoming that have a skill of artificial intelligence. Not very many people, first of all, and then secondly, we're able to see through that data, 82% are male. So there's a lot of work to be done in markets like Wyoming in general. I would say that's consistent across the board in a lot of the communities we work in. I'm curious, Matt, how you're approaching AI and some of these specific skills gaps from the data perspective and how you're approaching that from LinkedIn's perspective. Then Dennis, same for you for Microsoft and TechSpark.
Sure, yeah. So one thing that we can see is those kind of skills gaps in our data. We know what people are trying to learn and what's fast growing. And we also know of any gaps between what jobs are out there versus the candidate pool in that geography and the skills that they have. So all that informs the kind of courses we develop on LinkedIn Learning. So there's about 20,000 courses in the library on LinkedIn Learning. But AI has obviously been a huge focus recently. So when it comes to kind of trying to close that skills gap with AI specifically, one thing that we did recently was we made 100 courses free for anybody on LinkedIn. And I expect that we'll continue to kind of partner in that way along with Microsoft. We did something similar out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that powered a lot of the programs that, like the TechSpark is running. And so I imagine that with AI, we'll continue to push to get people in the door at least and learning the foundational elements and moving from there. But developing more and more content too, we've obviously got a giant AI team internally at LinkedIn that we can tap as course instructors or to identify what are the things that are coming up in their day-to-day. And then we're owned by Microsoft, so Microsoft's a huge player in that space. All our content related to Microsoft in any way is always up to date. As soon as Microsoft's ready to go, we're ready to launch a course that accompanies whatever those new softwares are or new initiatives are. So we'll continue to be pushing in that way too under Microsoft umbrella.
Good stuff, Matt. Yeah, so one thing I'd mention, just like at a site level, when we do one of these skills accelerators, like in Cheyenne, we'll bring in 25 people for about it's like 4 weeks, I guess, ish, and do that, and then we do that probably 3 times a year, something like that. And when we first started doing it, I'm like, oh, I'm the local expert, listen to me, and I'm making fun of myself here. I'm like, we need to do customer service and sales rep because Wyoming people aren't ready to go do all the fancy, wild, technology type tracks. And so we did those for a while, and those are successful. Then we moved into project management, and I was kind of nervous, except that we brought people along from some of the earlier cohorts into a second level cohort when you're starting to see people climb up the stairs or the ladder. That was cool. And then this last one we did was a data science one, and it is going like gangbusters, and I'm realizing I'm an idiot, and there's tons of appetite out there, and I shouldn't think so poorly of my fellow Wyomingites. And so that's been really fun to watch, just the different array of people we draw in for the different skills. And I think very much front and center for all of us, and we have a new fiscal year starting in July at Microsoft. So that's kind of our budget cycle. And I think in this next fiscal year, we fully intend, as us and LinkedIn and Generator come up with the AI curriculum, whatever that needs to be. And that's what I mean, the space is moving so quick. It's like you got to nail it because you're going to take all these people's time and hopefully give them value, and you got to do that, right? You can't teach them things that don't have any relevance to getting a job. And so that's kind of exciting that I think we'll be doing some AI skilling courses in Boynton, Virginia, and Cheyenne, Wyoming, and Quincy, Washington. So it's not even just the numbers, it's where those people are located that you're helping do that. And then I also see that kind of spill over into our accelerator, where the G-Beta accelerator, where people are doing founding skills. So I can't wait for some AI companies to start to pop up as people get a handle because I think that's all interconnected. I would say, though, at a larger level, one of the bigger projects we're doing with Generator, each TechSpark region has a signature project, and so our, like, kind of the crown jewels in Green Bay, and, you know, it's a wildly expensive that, let's just say what we do in Green Bay is not what we do in Cheyenne, Wyoming. We partnered with the Green Bay Packers. The Packers wanted to have a reason for people to come to the stadium every day of the year, not 8 days a year. And so built a startup accelerator with them, and then have tied in the University of Wisconsin, trying to bring, you know, Wisconsin alumni back home. It's really powerful. But my favorite signature project is actually Taya Spellhogs in Fargo, and they built the Grand Farm with this partner called Emerging Prairie, which is just kind of all the players in her community. She's nodding, so I want to make sure I get this right. But they initially intended, it's an actual farm that someone donated the land, and they're building this farm to test autonomous farm equipment. So think, you know, whether it's like water sensing data on crops for, you know, water conservation, it could be drone type things, smart planters, you know, where the tractor plants like a certain kind of plant in a certain type of soil, you know, I mean, just really getting data going for ranchers and farmers. But now, and they do a skilling component, but now they're going to start adding in at a pretty hefty level AI skilling for this specific agricultural sector. So that's really exciting, and I know everybody's kind of scrambling because it's really cutting edge space, you know, and so very important work, and really excited to see how some of these play out, specifically in these rural areas. You know, it's one thing to be in New York City and get your AI skills, not knocking New York City. To me, it's so cool for a town of, you know, 5,000 people, for people to have the same access to those kinds of skills. You know, it's always said that, like, the internet has all the knowledge of the libraries of Alexandria. It's just the will to learn it is lacking, you know, and so if we can just connect up, you know, through LinkedIn, all this information and skills to people who want it and want to do it and improve their life, their station in life, like, it's pretty powerful.
Stay tuned for some AI programming in the future, I think. To wrap us up, I just want to say thank you to both of you. I'll say publicly that Microsoft and LinkedIn are truly the backbone of the programming that we get to run. We're using Microsoft Learn and LinkedIn Learning as the core curriculum for our programming. And it's a true honor to be able to bring the two of you on stage. First time I met both of them. We've been working together for a long time, and we're meeting today, so this is pretty cool for me personally. But to wrap us up, any last remarks, and then we can open it up to some Q&A if anyone has any questions. And we can throw a microphone around at some point if anyone flexes down.
Well, people are deciding if they want to ask. I would just say thank you to Joe Kurgis and all the Generator folks. You know, Joe came to Cheyenne to visit with me when I had nothing going, and he was just like, yeah, I can see it. You could do that, and we'll do this. And have you ever thought about how, you know, just his energy is infectious. And I always have to remind myself that even though Generator's helping us run our startup accelerator, like, they're a startup themselves, and I've had the pleasure of watching them grow nationally and even now internationally, or soon to be internationally, from just a small little shop here. And so it's been fun to grow with them as entities, and just couldn't think more of the team that Joe's assembled with you all.
Questions?
I'm from the government, and I'm here to help you. We actually have to say that each morning as we approach it. It's our mantra. How do you reach the youth? I'm talking about going all the way down to elementary school up to secondary education, especially in underserved communities in this country. How do you reach them and encourage them to partake in artificial intelligence maybe, but generally speaking, how do you get them to partake in the kind of programs that of which you're talking about?
What a great question, and if you know the answer, please come find me after. No, we've a lot of our TechSpark work the last 5 years, 6 years has really been bringing more coding opportunities into the schools. And so, you know, we spent a lot of time, and the program I mentioned earlier about bringing computer science into schools is a Microsoft program called TEALS. And it was started by a Microsoft employee who would just go to a local high school and teach every 0 hour on his way into the campus to work. And then the teachers were like, hey, do you have any friends at Microsoft? And then his friends at Microsoft were like, got any schools? And then it becomes this, with sort of Microsoft's blessing, this sort of national program. And now it's even a franchised model. And what's powerful about it is we'd bring in computer science professionals to teach both the students and the teachers at the same time, so that within maybe 2 years, and it's very basic, like it's like Berkeley's Joy of Computing, it's like the most non-corporate focused, because I understand it's like, oh, that's a Microsoft thing or that's a Google thing. This is just straight computer science. And so a lot of, and the real metric on that was how many kids in a community sit for the AP exam, which is like a really high metric. And that's been really powerful. What's scary with AI is that, we're not even sure how, not just we as a collective, we don't know how to what sideboards to put on it, how to have students utilize it in a positive manner to learn. And so those are big questions, universities, the initial knee jerk is like, students are cheating, ban it. Versus, I'll see a guy on Twitter that has like 30,000 retweets because he's like, here's how I'm using, Chat GPT for my college class, and sort of lays out a curriculum of how to utilize it. And if you just think back to the internet, I'm sure there was a time when it was like, don't use Bing, don't use Google. That'll just give you the answers, and I'm sure way back, like, don't use a calculator. Like, come on, you got to do that in your mind, And so, yes, you do need to know the basic skills, but at a certain point, now it's like 7th grade. It's like, here's your crazy calculator because we know you can add and subtract and divide. And so it's figuring out how to do that. I do know we're exploring we have a partnership like with 4-H nationally, where we do, it's all of 4-H is 4-H, and we add in sort of digital skills and civic engagement, in a digital fashion, so that it's still 4-H, it's still 4-H. It's just giving these kids another tool in the toolbox to be like positive impacts in their community. And so I know we're exploring with 4-H of what sort of packet can we put together for AI so that a parent it can come from 4-H, that it's like legit, and because I get why people are a little scared of big tech, and that it shows how these kids can utilize AI to be a positive impact in their community or to learn. And I know we're all trying to figure that out, but if somebody has that figured out, let me know.
We're actually, we have a age restriction, so we're 16 and up, so no LinkedIn for the elementary kids, but it reminded me of something as far as even like a 16-year-old or 17-year-old that I wanted to bring up about closing the skills gap, and that's the overall kind of shift to more of a skills-based hiring strategies out there. We're seeing more state governments give up degree requirements. There's some private employers doing that too. And so that just reminded me of that with like high school kids picking up skills, adding skills to a profile like that, showing what they're proficient in can help them already at that age showcase those kind of skills to potential employers. But it really helps anybody out there that's looking for jobs. We have ways that they show proficiency in a skill on LinkedIn, and then we have ways that recruiters can see who's proficient and run searches for candidates, throw out the job title, throw out the degree, and just look for people that have the right skill set and figure out how to get those people into the jobs. So thanks for your question. It reminded me of that, but unfortunately I don't have a good answer for the elementary kids.
Okay, we have a question here. We're going to go here. I saw you and I saw Karen. Oh boy. And I have to tell you housekeeping things. So I'm going to cut it off in a minute.
Thank you. Thank you for the panel. Matt, you mentioned that you have a large AI expert in-house who are working on generating content. Could you tell us more about that? Like what direction on content you're taking when you're thinking about AI-generated content? Yeah, if you can expand on that.
Sure.
Thank you.
I may have misspoke. I wasn't specifically talking about AI-generated content, but within LinkedIn Learning, generating content for learners, we will probably be relying somewhat on our internal AI teams to help guide that kind of content, because we do have in-house experts that are building our own tools internally and can start to share their knowledge and develop courses for learners. But as far as AI-generated content, that's above my pay grade right now.
Thank you. Well, thank you for a great insights on what you're talking right now. Cole earlier mentioned about some states where they have about 200 people who are learning AI. And then I'm certain it's also a lot of states also involved. I'm talking specifically today on a different continent. What are you doing? What is your strategy to leverage the untapped talent in Africa? Again, seeing that Africa for the next 10 years is going to be one of the biggest players in terms of youth. What's going to be your strategy around that one? Thank you.
Okay, that's a great question, thank you. And so part of the problem with being at a company as big as Microsoft is I get to see like my little corner of the place. But I do have a team member in Atlanta who I believe that they're setting up a trip to Africa here fairly soon for the CEO based on a pre-trip she did. I sit in Microsoft Philanthropies, which is the largest corporate foundation in the world, separate from the Gates Foundation. Like that's Bill Gates, like this is Microsoft. And so, you know, we certainly have representatives all over the world and in different markets for sales and for philanthropy. And so if I get your name, I can find out a lot more because I know we're doing quite a bit there, but I just don't have it at my fingertips. But it's a powerful question, and it's like in some of these areas, you know, while we might talk like in Iowa, like we don't have broadband into the community, a lot of places in the world don't have electricity into the community, right? And so how do you even begin, you know, to start to transform that where you need electricity and you need clean water and you need internet, you know, like there's a lot of basic things that haven't even begun to be developed. It's a huge challenge, you know, but I could find out a lot more info for you, but I just don't have it at my fingertips, but come grab me after.
I can speak for Cole. We would love to bring generator skills to the continent. Okay, Karen, you're the last question.
Hi, Karen Caswelch, CEO of Bridge Robotics, and we're closing the gap in industrial robotics education. So I'm curious about skills accelerators tied to manufacturing, factory of the future, digital manufacturing.
All right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of actual people here in the room that are doing exactly that, and I would love to connect the dots to make that a reality. Here with our Generator Skills Accelerator, we really focus on tech-enabled roles. We haven't necessarily got into manufacturing or some of those other industries as of yet. Our model is for the wraparound services and be able to switch in and switch out different courses and curriculum. So all I have to say is I wouldn't leave it off the table, but I do know that there's some really talented people in the room solving exactly that, and that work is much needed. I have some colleagues here from Northeast Wisconsin, and all of them are always saying that we need manufacturing roles. So that is such a need, and across manufacturing, across tech-enabled roles, the list goes on. The Skills Accelerator model, both from Generator's perspective and then just, you know, the model as a whole is so needed. So I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, but all that to say is much needed and would love to connect the dots.
I would just add, one of our more interesting TechSpark communities is a binational one. So it's in Ciudad Juarez and El Paso. And so we have a manager like myself, but sitting on each side of the border to try and build what they call the Bridge Accelerator. And so it's an intent, because of NAFTA, you know, there's so many skills needed, you know, on the southern side of the border, and then all just the impact of immigration has on all these border communities. And so, don't mean that in a political sense, but just that, you know, we're trying to figure out ways to help raise the level of skills to folks that want to immigrate here, as well as job opportunities, even if they would sit in Ciudad Juarez. And I think we're also part of like a 5-nation group that's like sort of Central America. So, you know, it's the Guatemalas and everybody. And I think the White House runs that, where we're trying to figure out how can you create more economic opportunities so people don't feel the need to have to walk to the United States, which is just a sad thing.